The ideas expressed in the following presentations are those of the speakers and do not necessarily reflect the views of ACI or its committees. ACI web sessions are recorded at ACI conventions or other concrete industry events and will be made available for viewing free of charge for 1 week. Thereafter, they will be archived on the ACI website or added to ACI's online CEU program, depending on their content. You can earn continuing education credits through ACI's online CEU program. Visit www.concrete.org to register. ACI conventions provide an opportunity for networking and for keeping up to date with the latest in concrete technology and practices.
So wrapping it up this afternoon, and hopefully we'll take a few steps through this topic, and then maybe that's going to encourage you to come up with some questions that the rest of our speakers can join me and we can talk to you a little bit about maybe some questions that you have. But I want to talk about the global acceptance of tilt-up and the global implementation of tilt-up. One of the things that we tend to do in the industry specific to the U.S. and to our associations, we tend to look a little bit too close to where the volume of tilt-up is. And there's no denying the fact that the volume of tilt-up construction has largely been in the U.S. It's largely been in the big box market, the target distribution centers like Ed showed. There are some incredible projects and incredible density of projects in the multi-story buildings that Sean has taken us through. But it's the idea of dramatic form and the global acceptance of that dramatic form that I find to be one of the more intriguing things about tilt-up. And so what is drama in form? What do we think of when we think about dramatic buildings that stand in the landscape and give us a recognition? Now, historically, drama has come from the presence of the building in its final state. And so, you know, Egypt and the Egyptian pyramids are one of those that jumps out in my mind. Ed showed you the Pantheon, and certainly that's a dramatic example of building that has existed for a long, long time. Continues to perform, continues to be awe-inspiring. And perhaps one of the more recent examples in the Burj Khalifa is an example of modern technology that once the project is finished is a statement of dramatic alteration to the landscape. But realize that in all three of those examples, there was this tremendous duration of building schedule that had to take place. And at any one point that you walk away from the construction and come back, there's liable to not have been much change. So over decades, over hundreds of years, the pyramids were built, and over multiple years, the Pantheon dome was instilled, and over many, many months of work cycle, Burj Khalifa was put in place. So I'm going to take you through some equally as dramatic geographic locations. I'm going to look into South Africa. We're going to look at 4 projects in South Africa: the Freedom Towers and the Walter Sisulu Square of Dedication that you already got some glimpses of in Ed's presentation. Sibaya Casino also, Ed showed you a little bit of that. Another fantastic project, the Gateway Theater of Shopping. I also want to then go to Jordan, and we'll be looking at a housing prototype, and so that we can get a sense for drama of form and drama of development and delivery in 2 dramatic scales if you look at those last 2 types. Well, I'm also going to be in the Dominican Republic looking at Supermercados Bravo and Bravo Churchill, in Mexico at ADC Lune 30, in New Zealand at the Waitakere Sports Arena, and back here in Canada looking at Hanna America. And so from a global perspective, being able to take a look at drama, form, and function, I want to take you through 4 concepts that I have for you today. One is we're going to identify the presence of drama, and what is that different? How does drama in tilt-up differ for me in terms of looking at the here and the now and the process versus the drama of form in its eventual position in the landscape that you see in the pyramids and Burj Khalifa and Pantheon. And then from that, understanding the liberating freedom and why does form create such drama and tilt-up, but it's the process itself and the liberating freedom that comes from the construction process that delivers that form. And from there, then I'm going to use some of these examples that I've just listed for you to visualize the powerful form that's available. We've seen a lot of that already, but kind of create some more examples in your mind that ultimately allow us to see the partnership of that form, the delivery method, and how the functionality of tilt-up structures are changing because of the form that's able to be delivered. It's really my goal today. So let's start off with the presence of drama in the tilt-up industry. And for me, drama isn't that final building. Even though the One Hayworth Center is a fantastic project and is certainly emulative of the type of drama that exists of a final production or construction delivery to the landscape historically, it's the process that gets you there that is so dramatic in tilt-up construction. And if you look at the scale of some of these photos, the scale of the people in particular, to the pieces that are being delivered, I mean, there's incredible drama in the sense that of the motion that takes place from horizontal to vertical. So this is a massive structural frame being delivered here in the Bravo Churchill project in Santo Domingo. This is a project, and you'll see it in multiple views, but this is a two-story parking garage that exists below a shopping market. And there's some reasons for that I'll get to. Here's a rather large monolithic curved panel at ADC Loon 3 in Mexico. And again, you see the size of these panels and the curvilinear nature of the project. This is one of the Freedom Towers as it's starting to be erected. And what's curious about this photo is not just the size of that panel that's under the process of erection with the two guys that are standing on the panel, but it's also, take a look at the scaffolding underneath of it. These panels weren't cast on the ground, they were cast on scaffolding so that they could get the relief and the complexity of the towers without the construction joints that they needed. This was the only way that they could produce this Freedom Tower panelized system. And this is the erection process for Gateway Theater Shopping. And again, really large panels in relation to the scale of the site, but because of the size of the building, even the size of the panel that is so out of scale to you and I, the panel itself is so out of scale to the building itself because of the sheer size of this project. 3.42 million square feet under roof in this shopping mall. So a project that any of us would envy the opportunity to deliver. And this is just an interior view of a panel going up in the courtyard portion of this project. But again, the sense of scale as 3 stories of larger than normal story height plates are being closed in by these massive tilt-up panels that were horizontal at one moment and vertical in the next. And again, another very large panel. This is the Supermercados Bravo project, also in the Dominican Republic, and you can see the variety of openings that are achieved in that. But the mobility of these panels on the job site and the fact that here's a rather large mobile crane that is responsible for lifting this, getting it to vertical, and then moving it across the project site. And in relation, in many respects, to the project that Kimberly just showed you, the museum project, this Hannah America project in Niagara Falls, Canada, and you can see a very unique application of a tilt-up panel, somewhat like Sean showed in the multiple-story individual height panels going up. But look at the large return that happens on this panel across the top and down the side, and they're literally hanging this panel off of 2 masonry or 3 masonry towers, 3 masonry columns, if you will, and you'll see how that gets folded into the project itself. But some very dramatic movement taking place on the job site. And then over to Jordan, and here you have the substructure for a prototype house that was set in place, and then one of the final roof panels being set by aerial crane here. Now, this is probably a great one of the best examples of there being nothing on the job site, and then all of a sudden there being something on the job site, and that something being a finished structure. And so the drama that happens in tilt-up construction oftentimes results in almost a pure horizontal site that it could be mistaken for somebody preparing a subgrade slab, and then instantaneously in a day or 2 days there being a structure there that is now the visualization of the dream that the owner had, and the delivery of the design and the intent that the architect put in place. All of a sudden the contractor flips a switch in many respects and dramatically makes a building appear. And of course we can't talk about drama, we can't talk about form and movement and drama in tilt-up without going back to that image that you saw earlier from Walter Sisulu of this, this radically curvilinear panel that is, in this one, is flat at the base and curved at the top, and it has a sister panel or sister panels that were flat at the top and curved at the bottom. And the fact that the very nature of picking this concrete panel up while it's still wet until it forms itself the curve that it wants to be and then cures. No, really, it just cured. I'm just teasing you. But this panel was built, as a skateboard ramp. I mean, you can imagine maybe some teenagers after that panel was lifted going back to the form and having some fun and spinning their wheels along their skateboard ramp. But a very dramatic example of form moving across the landscape and developing imagery for the owner. So how drama of form takes shape because of the nature of tilt-up construction is what is so unique about this site cast method of delivering building technology. And it's very liberating freedom. The essence, the basic nature of the process that gives it that liberating freedom. Here's another view of that massive tilt-up structure frame that I showed you before from the Dominican Republic. Again, a 2-story parking garage, and you can see the successive frames that were all site cast on this base slab that's 2 stories below the rest of the grade. And those are all stood in place, ready to be tied in with some cast-in-place beams that will connect them all, while at the same time tilt-up panels are being erected around the top. I guess I could use a pointer here for you. While the tilt-up panels also cast in this same slab area are being stood up into the perimeter, both as retaining walls for the grade and the above-grade structure that will house the supermarket above. And the fact that tilt-up construction begins horizontal, begins on a simple concrete slab, whether that's a structural slab, most often not structural, but here you have what vertical formwork only amounts to the thickness of the panel. So literally anything that is created in the minds of the designer, and certainly as Ed showed you from Mitch's design for that Korean War Memorial, virtually any dream that can happen can be placed in tilt-up technology. And so this is back to that ADC Loon 3 project in Mexico, and you'll see the reinforcing cage being set in place into the forms, prepared ahead of time, off to the side, ready for concrete once it's down and set. And these will be structural columns that I'll show you, but they've cast all those structural columns together so that there was a repetitive element. There was a relationship to them and a relevance to their unique nature on the project. Or again, go back to simplicity, and here's a very large panel on that Bravo Churchill supermarket project, but you can see the reveal pattern that's been set in place here, kind of this rhythm that will be established once that panel is cast and stripped from the forms. There'll be this very nice vertical reveal pattern that gives texture to along this one wall that then ends up getting washed with color. I've been on this project. It's a very, very striking project, although when I show you the final version of it, you're going to go, well, that's no big deal. But there's a reason for that. So again, it's in the drama of the construction. And the site itself, the fact that all of these panels are all laid out, and this is that horizontal nature, that fact that you show up one day and then the site's flat, and you show up the next day and the site is suddenly built, or maybe less than a week later. But all of these panels are arranged and planned in their specific location, and the fact that in this project, here we are below grade, and yet they've got this crane that drove down into the basement and is setting these panels. And I can imagine what this site was like for all the residents of the community as they're peeking over the hurricane fence down into this hole and watching these massive panels being moved around by crane. Truly a dramatic instance. Here's one of those structural frames being set. You can see the rebar that sticks out. So the contractor, who was also engineer for this project, broke the parking garage into these horizontal frame structures, replicated them as many times as he could, stood them, braced them, and then the connections between the two of them, they just formed up cast in place beams and tied all of those frames together. So it eliminated the amount of cast in place forming that they had to do, or they reduced it. They reduced the cast in place forming by 2/3 and were able to speed up the project. The last time he told me, I think it was something like 2 months were saved in the structural component of this parking garage by being able to tilt up most of the structural frames. Just another example. And this is regardless of the method of construction, but it's certainly a great example of where drama exists in photographing construction today. But you can see the massive nature of those tilt-up frames, the repetitive braces. That's just an imposing vision in this photo. And then back to South Africa for that Gateway Theatre of Shopping, just to kind of remind a sense of scale and the use of patterns. There were 184,000 square feet of panels on this project, which is larger than a good chunk of the tilt-up buildings that are done floor area-wise. So it was a massive, massive project. And here are the panels. This is it. This is a house set out before you. And that's about all it takes to put up a house. And so literally you can see, once they've cast those forms full of concrete, let it cure for a couple of days, and decide this is the go time. From the moment that the crane grabs the first panel to the time that the crane releases the last panel, it could be a day, could be less than a day, and suddenly there's a house there, ready for somebody to at least begin picturing the ability to inhabit. And drama certainly takes place in the construction process itself, just in the forming. Now you saw an image of these in Ed's presentation. This is one of the panel sets for that Sabaya Casino project. But imagine tackling the architectural vision with the translation to site forming that took place for this contractor, and having to go from two-dimensional drawing to this three-dimensional reality that is the inverse void he has to create to produce the finished form product. The magnitude and complexity of this in a dramatic example of construction for tilt-up, I think, is perhaps one of the more striking ones that I've still yet to come across. And this is the skateboard ramp. This is where the teenagers, they left those in place so that the teenagers don't skateboard on the sidewalks. They go to the forms. But that is, who thinks of that? I mean, that is creativity. Creativity that an architect was able to think of concrete, first of all, in that type of a form. And then after everybody, architect, engineer, owner, we're all done saying, well, we're going to have to scrap this idea because we can't build it. And a contractor came in and said, you can't build that and cast in place because there's no way to support that forms, but I'll do it in tilt-up for you. That's an example of creativity to the nth degree. So if we haven't had enough of it already, I want us to visualize the powerful form then that results from this liberating freedom of technology. There's your structural columns that I showed you earlier for ADC3 in Mexico. These are K columns, or they called them K columns, and you can kind of see, you can kind of, just in the nature of the photograph there, begin to see a little bit of the K nature. You can certainly see it in that one. But these columns support lintels, curved lintel panels that form the roof structure for a main entry feature for the office side of this manufacturing facility, and then they emulated that, or they replicated that off to the side, and it housed the daycare for the employees that come to work at this facility. It's a beautiful example of form in this landscape. Again, here's the structural columns, and set in place over them, these were kind of T-shaped and curved all at once. Lintel panels that hang off of the tops of these K columns, and once welded into place, as Sean said, it becomes a very secure and very dramatic structural component in this particular case as well. And you'll see some variety. This is one of the construction shots of the Sabaya Casino. This project was 7 pods representing the 7 tribes that were in that region that came together to create this casino, and so each tribe has got to have a different architectural variety that at least gives them homage to their tribe. And so each one of these were designed differently, so you'll see that in each of the photos. So we go from structural support that was flat against the domes to these are sticking outward, perpendicular to the dome. And these shells are bowed in plane as well as curvilinear in the vertical plane, and they vary in thickness. And so each one of them was unique in its character. But you can, again, get a sense for drama in the scale of the project. Another massive project. There's plenty of landscape in which to seat one of these in South Africa right now. 3.42 million square foot shopping center, and I believe this is something like 340 some thousand square foot casino. But the power of form also can be quite simple, and this is Supermercados Bravo back in the Dominican. And what you're looking at here is a simple tilt-up structure, a simple tilt-up. Ed was showing you monumental tilt-up and signage. Well, this is a single tilt-up panel that is the structure for what? The stair, right. So here you have the entrance. This will be the entrance to this facility, and it's part distribution center, part headquarters for what is 7 different supermarkets in the Dominican by this one company, actually a competitor for Bravo Churchill. Now the sad thing is that this building burned down, and so this structure, this is the only way you'll get to enjoy this structure is through these photos. But again, it's a very striking and creative use. This was that panel I showed you earlier being moved across the site, and see how now it's not just going to be a standard footing bearing panel. It's actually a lintel panel that's going to be secured between 2 verticals in relationship to a shorter lintel panel off to its side. And one has horizontal windows, the other one just has horizontal bands. Freedom Towers that you saw earlier, bathed in the night sky and lit up with color. This is what they look like during the daytime. And these are panels that, depending on which panel you look at, some of them are black aggregate with white cement and some of them are white aggregate with black cement, so that it gives the homage to the monument to apartheid that was symbolized with this Freedom Tower and the freedom that was created in South Africa. But these structures are massive. These are 67 feet tall. They're cantilevered from the ground, and the panels themselves are shell-shaped. In other words, they have a vertical and a horizontal return on this that we're looking at on the space side, and some of them are flat on the back and some of them have a central rib on the back. And this is the Sisulu project. I believe we saw this photo as well in Ed's presentation. But the drama, the power of form as this horizontal curvilinear panel then gets turned vertical, and begins to be set into the form itself, into the building form, and how that begins to relate to size, position, movement around the site, and scale, looking at the construction worker. So finally, from all of that, from the presence of drama in the construction process itself, facilitated because of the very tactile and horizontal, simplified nature of tilt-up construction that gives it its freedom to really move and shape and develop diversity in form, is the fact that function then flows from that or is affected by that. Now, ultimately, each of these structures was an answer to the intent for the project. None of these projects flowed out of an idea that, hey, that'd be a cool way to build a panel. Let's see if we can build a building around that panel. I'm not suggesting that, but I am suggesting that then the function, the true function or the use of that building is augmented or altered because of the presence of that form and the ability to deliver that striking form. And it changes in different ways. You know, this is a very striking, perhaps one of the more striking ones in my presentation, but when it's said and done, you drive down into this two-story garage, and it could be any two-story parking garage. But the scale of it, the fact that you're driving by these tilt-up panels, and where do you see circular concrete openings like that but in a tilt-up panel? And so you drive by that as you descend into the parking garage. And this is what I was telling you earlier about the final structure. Now, if you walk down the street in Santo Domingo and you look at the side of that building, you'll never know any of that exists until you drive your car down into the parking garage, by those that tilt-up wall with the circular openings, and you drive your car through the tilt-up panels, and you can truly see the difference where the cast-in-place beams are and the rest of them are tilt-up frames. But perhaps more dramatic than anything else is that it facilitated the presence of a two-story parking garage and a supermarket in a metropolitan area where there's no land available to build something of this nature. The reason they have 2 stories of parking below grade is because there's no land available. The land's been eaten up for a century or more. And so they have to build vertical. They have to go below grade. And being able to do that on a zero lot line relationship, in fact, they actually built underneath portions of the sidewalk, is truly dramatic in the ability to deliver that function for the city. This is stepping back from that Hannah America site in Canada, and this panel that's hanging, being supported by these masonry columns. So you get a sense of lintel and function, or of form, and how it relates to some of these other tilt-up panels around it. But there's the entrance corner, and how dramatic a statement this is for the entrance of what really is a very small structure. And so if we look at the floor plan, if we were able to see the drawings and look at the floor plan for this building, it's really meager. There's not much to this building until you step back and you look at the form that was delivered and the structural integrity of these tilt-up panels, these what look like fingers growing out of the ground to support structures all around it, and then this, this crown for the entrance feature. And this is an example. This is probably the best example of form facilitating function. This is a sports and events center in Auckland, New Zealand, and you'll see tilt-up panels, much like the moment frames or the structural frames for the parking garage I showed you previously. These are the stanchions for the seating inside the sport arena, and how easy it is to stack cast all of those, repeating the structure one after another. And you could have, if you think in your mind's eye of 7 or 8 of those stacked on top of each other, replicating the form, and then literally pulling them off like a deck of cards and setting them in place, preparing the facility for the structure. But this project went a step further, actually a huge step further. Here's the seating, so all those structural stanchions are below, but notice these massive panels out here. These are tilt-up panels, and all they are buttresses, tilt-up buttresses that grab a hold of the massive spanning steel joists, steel girders that free span the interior space of this sporting and event center. So Ed talked about the Pantheon and how that was bested by the Houston Astrodome many years later, decades, centuries later. This is a step beyond that, maybe not in size, but certainly in building technology, and how simple it was for a tilt-up contractor to cast this panel and to set this panel and to brace this panel, but how efficient it is to support this single-span roof that then gives the interior of this facility. And then those panels, those P-shapes or the P-shaped buttress panels, then give you that final form that they clad in metal. So again, you would never see that in the final form. And so the drama of tilt-up oftentimes gets hidden, gets lost once the construction. Here you see that stair tower over here between the levels of this office component for what is a massive distribution center. And what a shame it is. There's that large panel that's virtually hanging in the air. Now that's truly dramatic form. And there's still motion in this image. There's not motion in the building anymore because it's collapsed due to a fire. But the motion, the drama that existed in the tilt-up process, I think, is forever emblazoned in this photo, forever present in the minds of the contractor that delivered it. Now, what does that stair tower look like? Shopping cart. Isn't that cool? Pretty creative. And there's the finished look of the Baty Casino in South Africa. Again, one of the got to be one of the top 4, top 5 most dramatic tilt-up structures ever constructed. Sean's trying to get one of these built in Quebec. And I think the night shot of this project is probably the biggest benefit to it, and how those tilt-up structures that are very much the structure supporting each of those pod domes play a role in the lighting and the presence of that facility at night. Well, let me back up one. You can also see that they didn't just finish with tilt-up buildings around each of these pods, but they made tilt-up panels that span all the way through the landscape and create the promenade entrances to each of these facilities. And you've seen this one already. Again, a very striking depiction of the Freedom Tower at night. And this is really cool. This is how they finished those curvilinear panels at Sisulu. Painted them yellow. And I don't know if you can see it from where you're seated, but this is open air, so this is its final look. You walk into this courtyard that's cast in place frame all around, and here are these massive yellow panels. There's a set here, and there's a set on the opposite side of the entrance. But you can see where these portals the water is coming out of as the rain gathers behind it and pours out in front of it. So there's a living nature to that wall as it sits in the use of that facility, and how now function is the function of coming to that dedication site and moving around and interpreting that site is affected by those yellow panels. And here's some final views of that very massive shopping center, and you can see the size, the scale of those panels. So there still is drama that exists in the finished landscape with those panels. And I think there's also drama here. Such a small project, and I imagine myself living there, and I imagine Ed, because that's actually the footprint for his house he's getting ready to build, and how his life is going to be affected, the lives of those that are going to be that live in that. But the tactile nature of concrete, the drama that's delivered in the way that light pours in and through that, and how simple it was to deliver that with tilt-up construction, as well as how quick it was, how efficient it was. And as Sean said, with insulated tilt-up, the fact that tilt-up is providing that continuity of air barrier, how effective it is and how dramatic a difference it is from the building technology that you probably currently reside in. And just a finished shot or two of ADC Loon 3, the final painted version, installed glass, and how that sets apart from these massive structural columns that support. This is the entrance feature to the office, the headquarter component for this manufacturing facility, and I had previously shown you the construction view of the daycare center. So drama exists in a very real nature in and around, drama of form in and around the tilt-up industry. It's the presence of that drama that I think is set up because of the very nature of its construction process that the contractors have begun to professionally employ and embrace, and also to explore, because once once they achieve a certain level of proficiency with tilt-up, they're actually looking for where to go from there. It's not a static form of construction that once you get to a certain level of knowledge that you're done. You now just build tilt-up that way the rest of your life. And from that, the visualization of that powerful form that exists, so that there's a whole series of generations that come after these talented contractors and designers that are employing it that can begin to look back and can feel and can get a sense for how they shaped the presence of the function of working in and around those forms, as well as then our ability to translate that into life. That to me is the drama and the form, the function of tilt-up, and it's also kind of the purpose for why we put on this technical session. I hope that you've appreciated it. I hope you've learned something. I hope maybe you have some questions that I can direct to one of our three talented speakers, and we'll entertain those now. Or forever hold your peace. Any questions? Oh, come on, one question. Yes, sir, Ken.
Jim, there were some pretty dramatic design challenges shown there, and I'm just curious, the focus in those countries were designed by engineers there. I was very impressed with the challenges I saw.
Good question. The South African projects were a tremendous collaborative effort. The Dominican Republic ones, I mentioned during that presentation that they have the fortune of the engineer and the contractor being of one mind. Now he has a very large team that he employs, and he does most of his work in BIM modeling. But certainly when you have engineer and contractor either in the same person or working very closely together, it's much easier. But in the South African projects, which I think are by far the most striking projects out there, oftentimes it's an architect that comes from Europe. It's an engineer that is maybe either a European engineer or a South African engineer that is truly looking for outside expertise, and through the contractor have been able to bring in consultants. I think the Sabaya Casino project for sure was, as well as Gateway Theater Shopping, there were 4 different consultants that were brought in from the U.S. And the contractor was a concrete contractor from South Africa. So it takes a lot of expertise to span the gap of what's present, but that's the nature of the product, the fact that the technology can be so quickly transferred from one to another. The rest of them are more traditional. The rest of the projects that I showed, where you'd have an engineer, maybe a northern Mexico or a southern U.S. engineer involved with a contractor on either side of the border, and kind of the same thing happens in Canada as well. Good question.